Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. We're back, and this is a special episode because it's a three-way. We've got every single member of the team on board for this episode, so we're going to sort of try and navigate the dynamics of it all. But I'm going to host the first section. My name is Jonathan Viduba, and I'm joined this week not only by Steve Wiss, but also by Henry from Football in Denmark. I'm going to start with our guest, of course. Henry, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Dealing with the exertions of another week, but yeah, all good. Looking forward to getting stuck into some of the European games this week.
And of course, Mr. Meatman Soccer, as ever, the regular stalwart in the defensive midfield role. How are you today?
I'm all right, thank you, Jonathan. I hope you are well. Mr. Henry Nichols, it's great to have you on board, as always. And
thank you.
Let's get ready to rock and roll because we've got plenty to discuss.
Yeah, we're going to start this week with a different kind of show. We're going to start European instead of domestic. So, of course, this week is quite a big week for Norway, Sweden, and Danish football because if any teams make it through, of course, through this next round of European qualification, then they will make their group stages of the various Europa, Champions League, and Conference League. So, it's a pretty big week for all our teams. So, we thought, what better to do than preview it all, get everybody on board, and sort of look at what the prospects are. So. First, we'll just run through some of the games coming up. Of course, we've got on Tuesday, Buda Glimt against Dinamo Zagreb, and then we've got FC Copenhagen against Trabzonspor. Henry, you might correct my pronunciation there. I don't know if I might upset anyone saying Copenhagen. I don't know. On Wednesday, we've got Djurgården against Apoel Nicosia in the Conference League final qualifier, and obviously that's a Cypriot team, so Djurgården from Sweden. And then on Thursday, we've got quite a lot. We've got Europa League qualification finals, Malmo against Sivasspor of Turkey. We've got HJK Helsinki against Silkeborg, which is, of course, a bit of a Nordic affair. We've got Molde against Wolfsberger of Austria, which will be interesting. Molde, can they get through in the Conference League? Slovako against AIK. And I think that is all we've got. No, we've got FCB against Viking. And we've also got West Ham Viborg, which is a big one in terms of the English audience. A lot of eyes will be on the Danish team there going to London. And I think that's pretty much all we've got. So we're going to start with Tuesday's games. Why not? Do it in order. I will start with you, Henry, as our guest, talking about FC Copenhagen against Trabzonspor. Now, there's been a bit of anyone who follows us on Twitter and Nordic Football might have seen a little bit of a extra increase in mentions of late. Our engagement is definitely gone up. Analytics, we'll take it. We'll take it all day long. And also, Henry at Football in DK, I believe you've had a bit of a extra interest in your mentions due to the Turkish side qualifying. Firstly, just tell us a little bit about what happened when the draw was made, and then tell us, just your outlook on the game, like going into it. Where would Copenhagen see themselves in this match? Because they're not doing amazingly in the league. So yeah, just give us a bit of an overview of this match.
Yeah, it's not my first rodeo mentioning a Turkish team on Twitter and seeing what happens. Their fans are nothing if not vociferous in their support for their team. So yeah, I just tweeted that the draw. This was the draw. FC Co were playing Trabzonspor, and within about an hour, I had about 100 replies, mainly just GIFs and videos of the atmosphere inside the stadium. And so, yeah, there's no doubt at all the away leg is going to be a feisty affair. In terms of how I see the game panning out, I think the bookies have it more or less 50-50. I think maybe slightly in favour of Trabzonspor. I mean, I think there's a bit of pessimism coming from some of the Danish fans that I speak to just because of how FC Co are going this season. They lost this weekend against Randers and only won twice in the league this season. They lost Mohamed Darami, who, of course, is back in Copenhagen on loan for the season. And in what little he's played this season, he's looked brilliant. So he got injured this weekend, and centre-back David Kochlava, who again has looked great, he's also injured. So they're coming into this fixture probably at a bad time in terms of form and in terms of injuries. But that said, it's going to be one of the big biggest European games in a few years in Copenhagen, so anything could happen. But yeah, I think it's the tie is very much in the balance. Maybe Trabzonspor just shade it a little bit, but there's not going to be much in it.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, like you said, in terms of the magnitude of the game, this is for a place in the Champions League group stage. This is big. Let's face it. So, with that in mind, of course, even with Glimt as well, Steve, you got to look at it like having Buda Glimt in the Champions League group stages would be incredible, really. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Henry, in terms of like the team news and maybe anything else to look out for. But Steve, as well, how big is this for Glimt? I know they're playing Dinamo Zagreb. Zagreb are sort of kind of old experienced heads, aren't they, in the European stage, let's say, but at the same time, they're not necessarily the most dominant force getting into the Champions League group stages. So for them as well, it's a huge game. But for Glimt, this will be the first time in their history of reaching this stage, isn't it? And probably on this podcast, would you agree with me in saying that I know we're going to be supporting them, but they almost deserve it, don't they? Champions League group stage. They almost deserve the big stage. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think everyone worldwide would agree with that, apart from perhaps Tromsø fans, really. Tromsø fans are literally hiding behind the sofa, aren't they? They're desperate for Dinamo Zagreb to get them a result over these two matches. But the last time that a Norwegian team was in the Champions League group stage, gentlemen, anyone want to guess what year, what season it was?
Rosenborg, 2000,
right?
2005.
Certainly Rosenborg.
I'll say Rosenborg 2012.
2007/8, and it was the year where they went to Chelsea, got a draw at Stamford Bridge, and I think Mourinho was sacked. I think it was. Anyway, since then we've had Rosenborg were close 1920 season against Dinamo Zagreb, actually knocked them out, and then Molde lost on penalties against Ferencvaros of Hungary. So this is a really massive chance for Buda Glimt. Fair to say it's probably the biggest two ties in their history. I mean, what's the dangling carrot is at least probably £10 million, if not more, I'm guessing. You might know better than me there, boys. But, I mean, this is a real 50-50 game. I think the bookmakers can hardly split them both. Maybe Zagreb are slight favourites. I've looked at their squad today. I did a bit of research on it. They've got the goalkeeper is the Croatian national team keeper, Linkakovic or someone like that. 31 plus Croatian caps. They've got plenty of players in the squad who are highly valued, and they're kind of experienced European campaigners. They don't qualify for the Champions League every season, but they're certainly at least Europa League sort of standard. And it's really important Buda Glimt to win the home leg. I think the home leg first probably suits them because no one likes to go to Buda Glimt on this artificial pitch, and they can they've really got nothing to lose here in a way because away goals don't count anymore. I think that suits Buda Glimt. They're going to give absolutely everything here, push hard. I think there'll be plenty of goals in the first leg. And I think they know, really, they need to take at least probably a 2-goal advantage to Croatia, don't they? To be realistic. It's a tough place to go. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is, like you said, the biggest game, probably in the biggest two games in their history. You have to admit that. The press conferences before the game, they mentioned that, I think Kjetil Knutsen mentioned that he's ready for a historic match. So, yeah, I think it's going to be exciting, actually. I think, although some people might have heard of Buda Glimt in the, not on this podcast, of course, you'll have heard about them a lot, but in the European stage, although you get whispers, don't you, when they beat Roma, for example, you get, there was talk about them a couple of times, in the past year or so on the sort of bigger stage. But I think for teams, for those who might not know about Buda Glimt, Steve, just very briefly, like, what could we expect from them in terms of if they were to make it into the Champions League? Like, what's so good about them for people who might not have even listened to this podcast or not studied Glimt? Like, what would be good about them being in the Champions League? What would they bring to it?
Well, they're a small club from the Arctic Circle, and they weren't even in the top flight of Norwegian football 5 years ago. So they've kind of come from this from the second tier. There's not been like huge money. A lot might look at Buda Glimt and think, oh, they must have a sugar daddy who's come in from, I don't know, Qatar or somewhere and just spearheaded loads of funds like that. But they've developed a lot of their own youngsters, brought in some great young players as well, and this fantastic coaching team managed to sell quite a few, make some good profit from it. And they're managed by Kjetil Knutsen, who is highly regarded. And, I don't think anyone hasn't heard of Bodø/Glimt now after the Roma matches last season. But aside from that, they're a nice side to watch, entertaining, attack-minded, and I think they try and play football in the right way, which is good to see. So they're a great team for sort of a neutral to support. Like I say, I think everyone's probably cheering them on apart from Tromsø fans in this match. Simple as that.
Yeah, and obviously apart from Zagreb fans as well.
And Zagreb fans as well.
So, yeah, I mean, on what you've just said there, Kjetil Knutsen said before the game, we've got everything to win and we are ready for a higher level than we've ever seen before. That was Ulrik Saltnes who said that in the press conference. Obviously, the Champions League press conferences that they do. And Kjetil Knutsen said, the expectations are that we will play a historic match. We must be ourselves as much as possible. We will attack. We are not naive. And we will take their qualities into account. So, yeah, it's a huge game, to be honest. And I think, like you say, could be good if they could get through. But I think it will be probably a tough game for them, to be fair. Henry, let's move on to, before we make predictions of these two games. Henry, what do you think about Copenhagen's chances in terms of, I've seen that they've actually, Trabzonspor have got a Dane in their side, Andreas Cornelius. I think he played in England at one point as well. So he'll be looking to knock out his compatriots, I guess, from the competition. But how big would this be for FC Copenhagen? Because I remember, I even actually remember going to watch FC Copenhagen in the Champions League many years ago when they played Manchester United. One of the coldest games I've ever been to in my life. And you remember that team of like Darman Doy and they had a good team back in the day. They were for a little bit in the Champions League, weren't they, for a while?
Yeah. So
how big would it be for them to get back into it? And how are they looking ahead of this game?
Yeah, so I actually, Damendoy was there on Friday to be sort of put into the pantheon of greats of former FC Co players. So that was a cool moment. In terms of going back in the Champions League, I think it's really important, primarily from a revenue and a reputation perspective. As Steve was talking about what it means monetarily, the difference between the Champions League and the Europa League is massive. So there are complexities to this with market shares, etc. But the kind of base level figure is that getting into the group stage is worth about 15 million euros, and then you get 2.8 million euros for a win and 930,000 euros for a draw. And just sort of comparing that with the Europa League, you only get 3.6 million for getting in the Europa League, with 630k for a win and 210k for a draw. So in terms of money, you're looking at 4+ times just getting into the Champions League group stage. On the flip side, though, you've got the ability to earn coefficient points, and actually you can pick up coefficient points much more readily in the Conference League and the Europa League. And as we all know, finishing in the sort of the top 15 tends to be the goal for any of the Scandinavian clubs, because that then enables you to have 2 Champions League places and more European spaces. So Copenhagen, if they made it into the Champions League group stage, looking at the other teams in there, I think it would be tough to finish anywhere other than 4th in the groups, just given the sort of the financial muscle. In the pot 3, you're looking at teams like, probably the weakest team there is Sporting, who are, massive. So I think that would be tough, but from a financial perspective, it would be really important. And yeah, you also mentioned Andreas Cornelius. He was a former FC Copenhagen player. Scored very famously in the cup final against Brøndby, and I think has a great feeling among the supporters. So that's going to be interesting seeing him come back for them.
And what's your general feeling about how this game will go? Obviously, Copenhagen first leg, they're going to be maybe looking to take it to their opponents. They're at home. Then they've got to go to Turkey, which is always going to be a tough place to go, as your Twitter mentions suggest, I imagine. What's your outlook on the game, and maybe a prediction in terms of how Copenhagen can, what can they look to go in this first leg to go back to Turkey? Yeah.
Okay. So I don't watch a lot of Turkish football, so I can't give you the ins and outs of Trabzonspor, but I can say that if you'd asked me this prediction a couple of weeks ago, I would have said I think FC Copenhagen can just edge it. In that time, they've lost their first choice goalkeeper, who sort of went for a cross and got head-butted in the face and has smashed his face up, so he's out for a while. And then another number of significant absentees, and I think that might just swing it in Trabzon's favour. The plus point is that away goals don't count anymore. So actually, FC Copenhagen can try and go out there and not be forced to play. They can sort of park the bus. And although their defence hasn't been that hot this season, last season it was fantastic. So they do possess the ability there. So yeah, I'm going to stay on the fence. Although I think that it's probably 55-45 in favour of Trabzon.
Fantastic stuff. Well, the game's at Parken. The referee's Michael Oliver. So that should be quite interesting. And yeah, both sides haven't been. I mean, the last time Trabzon were in the Champions League, they've only ever been in it once, and that was 11 years ago. And Copenhagen haven't been in it for 6 years. So Trabzonspor also haven't faced a Danish club in more than 30 years. So this is quite a big occasion, I guess, for Trabzon as well, who've had recent success. So, Steve, I'm going to ask you now your prediction.
Well, you know what? I've had a look at Trabzon. I actually watched Trabzonspor last year. They're excellent in the Conference League, qualifying against Molde. Went on to win the Turkish League. I've done a little bit of research into them. They've lost some players. They've lost one of their top performers last season, a Nigerian called Anthony Nawakwame. You might know him a bit better than me, but 13 goals, 10 assists. A few departures have left the books. I'm not sure, whether they're going to be as strong as they were last season. So, and, I've never honestly, to be fair, Trabzonspor were good last season, but this is not a league I've ever rated in recent years. I've got to be brutally honest. So I actually think FC Copenhagen, definitely would give them the edge here. It's not going to be easy, but over the two matches, I think they win in Parken. They'll get the win at Parken. The problem's going to be going over to Turkey, because that is an absolute, that stadium there, it's absolutely rocking. And that's the difficult part. But I think 1-0 FC Copenhagen first leg. And if Budaglimt, prediction for me, 2-1 to Budaglimt in the first leg against Dinamo Zagreb. So have you got a prediction, John?
And do you think I think Glimt could win, but do you think they'll go? Do you think Glimt will actually go through overall?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it goes all the way, extra time, maybe even penalties. But I've just got a gut feeling. You just have a feeling, don't you? It's their time, isn't it? I just sense that they make it through.
I really hope so. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys. We're going to move on to Wednesday's games now, aren't we, Steve? And you're going to sort of.
I am, because the one match in the Conference League qualification Wednesday, Djurgården against Apoel from Cyprus. Now, I think Djurgården have kind of gone under the radar a bit in this European qualifying, Jonathan. No one's really talking about them. They've got a heck of a chance here to make a group stage for, I'm guessing, the first time in quite some time. What do you know about this match? How are they shaping up? And Cypriot opposition. I've got to say, this is not a league I follow at all.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a good point you make there, I think, Steve, in terms of Djurgården going under the radar. They've knocked out. Well, then again, it's not exactly the giants of European football, but they knocked out Sepsi OSK, not to be confused with Pepsi. They knocked them out 6-2 and beat them 3-1 in the home leg in Stockholm on last Thursday. And actually, they dominated the game, I thought, and they were really good. Joel Asoro, the fans left the stadium singing his name. He was electric on that day. I think he scored twice, I believe. And he scored twice. Hampus Findel as well. They actually went behind 1-0. But came back 3-1 winners and won 6-2 on aggregate. I think that, like you say, I think Div have gone under the radar a little bit. Apoel, I looked at their result. They came through against Kizillar Petropavlovsk, which I don't know where they're even from, to be honest. Kazakhstan, they're from. Narrowly got through against the Kazakhstani team. So I can't really comment on the quality of Cypriot football.
But yeah, Cypriot football, the national team's terrible, but the club teams are often okay, aren't they? So I don't know about that. Have you got a prediction, Jonathan, before we move on?
I think Djurgården will win the first leg. I think it'll be like 2-1 maybe or something like that. But I'm not entirely sure if they will be able to get the result in the away leg. I think that they will have a mighty test in the second leg, because I think Apoel have a bit of European history about them. So my prediction for now is 2-1 Djurgården, and then we'll review it ahead of the second leg. But I'm fairly confident. I don't think Djurgården will ever have a bigger chance. They've not been in group stages of competitions like this for quite some time. So I really think this is a huge opportunity for them. And the way their season's going, it feels like they're ready to sort of maybe step up a level. So this is a really big game, I think, for just the recent history of Uruguay in general. I'm going 2-1.
On to Thursday, Europa League qualification here. And we've got shades of Royal League. HJK Helsinki against Silkeborg. Henry, this is. Do we know much about Finnish football? We need a Finnish expert on here, don't we? But this is an interesting looking clash. Big game for both teams. HJK, for Finland not to get a team in any group stage would be pretty bad, wouldn't it? But Silkeborg, I'm guessing, probably might even be the favourites here over 2 legs. I don't know, Henry, but how are they? They're shaping up quite well, aren't they? Started the season all right.
Yeah, they should be. I mean, they're massive favourites in my mind. In Denmark, there's a match between Nordsjælland and Silkeborg that's called El Plastico because it's the two teams with synthetic pitches, and Helsinki also have a synthetic pitch. So we've got an all Nordic El Plastico here. But yeah, Silkeborg are second in the table. They lost for the first time this weekend actually to Viborg in a bit of an upset, but they've hit the ground running. They look as good as ever. The one thing that I said, I think in the season preview, was that I fully expected them to have a great season as long as they could keep the gang together. Now, unfortunately, they've already lost one of the gang. Rasmus Carstensen went to Genk a week or so ago. There's strong rumours that Nicholas Hellenius is going to be heading to Brøndby, and Nikolai Vallis was linked with Copenhagen earlier in the window. So if they can get through this this tie with the front three intact, I expect them to win comfortably. But whether or not they'll manage to keep that same unit together for the group stages is another matter.
Yeah, I mean, HJK Helsinki, actually, they're not top of their own domestic league. It surprises me. Cups and Honka are both ahead of them in the table. It looks a three-way battle for the Veikkausliiga crown over there in Finland. So I don't know exactly the makeup. I mean, obviously, they're by far the biggest club in Finland by a million miles. And I think I read a couple of tweets, some fans up there. If they do make it to the group stage, it's only going to widen the financial disparity between them and the rest of the league. So I think quite a lot of Finland isn't really cheering them on. But I was looking at the odds. Silkeborg are the favourites away from home first leg, so overall they would be favourites to prevail. Would it be a disappointment, do you think, for Silkeborg, even though it was HJK Helsinki not to go through?
Yeah, I think it would be a massive disappointment, given how strongly they played last season and even this season, and how they've been able to sort of take their game and impose their game on big teams. I think it would be a real shame. I mean, I don't know Helsinki well enough, but there aren't many teams in the Superliga who can get close to Silkeborg at the moment, and so I'd be surprised if they went down in this one. But yeah. It's always different when you're playing an opponent you don't know as well. But I really fancy them to progress.
Prediction then for you, Henry?
I'm gonna in the first leg. I'm gonna go 3-1 Silkeborg.
Very good, very good. We're going to stick with Europa League qualification here. Malmo failed in the Champions League, of course, facing Turkish opposition as well. Sivasspor here, and Sivasspor actually only finished 10th in the Turkish league last year. They won the Turkish Cup. That's what got them to this stage of the campaign. Now, I know you've not been big on Malmo in Europe this season, Jonathan. They actually only drew a match against Luxembourg opposition last week. Surely, though, against a team that finished so low in the Turkish table last year, they're going to have too much.
Yeah, they struggled against Dudelange in the second leg, and I've been down on Malmo all season, to be honest, in terms of their European campaign. I remember early in the season getting criticism from some fans on Twitter saying that I was being a bit harsh on Malmo, but to be honest, the way their season's transpired, I feel kind of vindicated in a way, because they just haven't really been up to it, and I think most fans would agree. We'll talk about domestic form in a minute, but in terms of the game of the weekend, Malmo against GIF Sundsvall, I thought they were, again, unconvincing. Got a 3-1 win, but it was basically like a little late rally in the first half to get 3 goals, and then kind of slept through most of the rest of the match, really. I don't think you could take the Turkish team lightly, to be fair, even this game. I did see, funnily enough, that Trabzonspor played Sivasspor recently and beat them 4-0. So if that's an indication of the sort of levels we're talking here, then perhaps I might be overestimating them. The first game's in Malmo, obviously Malmo Stadium. Scottish referee, I don't know how that will affect anything, but I think that I don't trust this Malmo side. I'll be honest. I think both teams will score, if that makes sense. I think there will definitely be. I think it'll be a competitive game in the sense of where Sivasspor will have a chance throughout the whole tie, home and away. I don't think it'll ever be kind of like a 2 or 3-0, anything like that. But this is without knowing really the quality of Sivasspor. But if you look at Malmo this season, I mean, they got knocked out by Zalgiris, who Kilim absolutely battered. They struggled against the team from Luxembourg pretty much. Okay, they got through, but wasn't exactly, they weren't on fire. There's a lot of changes in their team in terms of new signings and things like that to integrate. They still have an interim manager. I think this is not a done and dusted tie by any means. So if you're a Turkish supporter listening to this as a fan of Sivasspor, I would say you can feel slightly confident going into this. I think we've got a chance.
Interesting stuff. But I mean, your prediction and overall over the two legs, do you think Malmo will do it?
I think it'd be borderline traitor of me to say no. I just feel like I'm letting the team down. I've got to support Malmo, but I'm not convinced.
If they don't make it through here, Jonathan, honestly, I'd be stunned. I would honestly be stunned. I really would. If they get knocked out by this side, I don't think it's a strong league anyway. And this is a team that finished 10th. They finished closer to the bottom of the table than they did the top.
I'm not.
I mean, anyone can win a cup, can't they? Let's be honest. You know, anyone can win a cup, but
I can think of a few who can't.
Put it this way, I'm not like, I think it might go penalties, extra time.
Well, it's a tough place. They need a lead, don't they, from the first leg? I'll say that, because to anyone, it's a tough place to go, Turkey. Whatever. We'll stick with you, actually, Jonathan. We can finish off your section. AEK against Slovako. We could end up with 3 Swedish teams in group stages here, which would be quite good, wouldn't it? But they've got a trip to the Czech Republic. I don't know much about this league, but there's some half-decent sides in it, isn't there? So Slovako, AEK only got here by virtue of penalties, actually. In fact, Slovako are odds-on favourites to win the first leg against them, so they must be decent. So, tricky-looking tie for them, but you never know.
Yeah, and again, it's another one where AEK haven't really been massively convincing. They came through against Skendija, I believe it was. But again, it wasn't like a game where AEK, they drew with Varnamo at the weekend. Obviously, we had their assistant manager on the show a couple of weeks ago. They've gone to AEK, which is a really tough place to go for a newly promoted team, and got a creditable 2-2 draw. Could even have maybe won the game, to be honest. So AEK aren't really in great form, I have to be honest. I think the timing of this game, I don't know if it's in their favour, if that makes sense. Narrowly came through, like I say, against Skendija. They needed penalties, in fact, Steve. So I think that I don't know anything about the team they're playing, Slovako, I have to be honest. But I feel like this is not the best of times for AEK. I think there's a few question marks about the team. I think there's a few question marks about the recruitment. Certain players, I think like Kim Pioka, for example, up front, Zach Ebuzedi, he actually had to. I think I mentioned it on a recent podcast, but he shut his Instagram page down because of all the abuse he was getting. Kim Pioka used to play for Sunderland, of course, and they pretty much weren't bothered when he left. And he's having a tough season, I think, to be honest. John Guidetti has just come back from COVID as well. He had COVID, so he's a new signing. They signed a player called Vincent Till. I don't know a huge amount about him, but he's like expected to bring the creativity to AEK. But they're quite a turgid side. I'm going to predict that they will go through, but I think it will be quite narrow. I wouldn't expect them to blow anyone away in this time.
Has the makings of extra time penalties again, doesn't it?
I can see
I must say, I've got a feeling the Czech side might actually be a bit strong there, but let's see. There is, let's go Conference League now, and a really big tie for Viborg. They travel to West Ham. West Ham, of course, no points on the board in the Premier League yet. I guess a lot of people will be thinking the Hammers make it through here, Henry. But what sort of challenge can Viborg give them?
Yeah, this is going to be. I'm going to be really fascinated to see this one, just because it's not often that you get a Premier League team playing a Danish team, particularly outside of the top kind of 2 or 3 teams. So I personally think Viborg play really nice football, very hard-working team, play at quite a high tempo. They love a counter attack. They create the most big chances in the league. We know all about Christian Sorensen, and so it's going to be interesting to see, you know, how that compares to a team who are one of the better sides in the Premier League. So yeah, I'm really fascinated by this one. I think the bookies have a Viborg win as below 10% probability. So it's going to be a big challenge for them. But I think that we'll follow Premier League teams, and I think it's quite easy to be sort of sniffy about the Conference League. But actually, when you see what these ties mean, particularly to a team like Viborg, who I think this is only their second ever season in Europe, and for their fans to be able to come over and play a game in the Olympic Stadium, for example, against West Ham, it's a really fantastic competition for kind of throwing up these ties that we wouldn't have necessarily got before. So I'm not necessarily holding out much hope for Viborg to progress, but I do think that you underestimate them at your peril, given they've started the season very strongly. They've got a very cohesive system that the way they play, they're very much a team that are more than the sum of their parts. And yeah, again, there's plenty of rumours linking their kind of top players away from them. I saw rumours of Christian Sorensen might be going to Brøndby. So if they can get these ties played with the players in the building, then they're going to give themselves the best chance. But I don't fancy their chances, but I'm going to be really fascinated to see them have a go.
I think you're right, Henry, in terms of what you say about the Conference League. Because to be honest, I think Steve, you probably agree that I really enjoyed the Conference League last season.
100%.
Get teams having new experiences. I thought the whole tournament was actually quite good. And you mentioned, I think was it Randers who were there last season?
Yeah,
they had an incredible adventure playing Leicester. And there's other teams who have really benefited from it. So I think it's, even for Glimt, it was a good adventure for them. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you're going to predict West Ham to win. Am I right in saying that? Or what do you think will happen? Will they get battered, Viborg, in the first leg? Or
I personally, I don't think they're a team that get battered. But I think that there's so much quality in that team. And I went on a West Ham podcast today, and one of the points that I raised is that according to Transfer Market anyway, the value of Viborg's squad is 8 million euros, and the value of West Ham's squad is 362 million euros. So the disparity is there for all to see. So I think this is one of those ones where it's almost a free hit for Viborg. They probably couldn't have got a much tougher draw, and so they owe it to themselves to just go out there and play as well as they can, and can see what will happen. And if West Ham underestimate them, or think this is the team they haven't heard of, so they can take it easy, I think they might well come a cropper, because Viborg are very much there on merit.
I don't
a quarter of a Schumacher is that? I think that 8 million.
Yeah.
So let's move on. I think that will be an interesting game, and of course I think it's on BT Sport as well. So anyone in England looking to watch the match, Henry, just quickly, what was the name of the podcast that you were on? Let's give him a shout out.
It was, I think it's We Are West Ham United.
That'll do. Good luck to We Are West Ham United. Steve, I'm going to move on to the Norwegian teams, because we've got Viking and we've got Molde. Who do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, we'll start with Molde against Wolfsberg, the Austrian side. And I want to echo your thoughts about the Conference League, by the way. I think it's nearly enough every other team takes it proper seriously. Look at Roma. They're actually the perfect ambassador as the first winners of it, really. Mourinho would want to win against the Dog and Dug, wouldn't he? And certainly Conference League was right up his street. But and I also would say that because in England we kind of look down upon the Conference League, I'm never a big fan of teams that are sort of in this qualification phase. I think West Ham will go through, but it might be more of a banana skin when you think. But Molde against Wolfsberger. Molde are full of goals, I'll tell you that, Jonathan. I'm expecting both of these ties to contain plenty of, if you're betting on the games, probably over 2.5 for both legs. And I think their extra offensive strength will be enough. But Molde, I mean, they were 2-0 down in Hungary against Kisvárda. Were given a bit of a scare there, then got a goal. I would imagine the first leg they'll win it at home. I don't know an awful lot about Wolfsberger, but Austrian teams can be quite hit or miss, can't they? But again, usually quite attack-minded. I've got to think over the 2 legs that they'll have enough for them, and I'd be disappointed if Mulder didn't make it through here. So I think it'll be 2 good games to watch.
Yeah, incidentally, the Austrian league is the 8th best league according to UEFA in terms of club coefficients. The Norwegian league is 17th, Denmark 18th, and Swedish 23rd. Funnily enough, Cyprus is actually ahead of the Swedish league as well, so it's 21st. So that just gives a bit of context. And Turkey is 20th. So that's just based on sort of performances, I think, over the last 5 seasons. I mean, just a brief mention of Lillestrøm, because they got knocked out in the last round, didn't they, Steve? I mean, was that a tough result for them? And how do you see this Viking game going as well?
Regarding Lillestrøm, I did my research on this Royal Antwerp team, and they look good to me. I think they'll go well in the Belgian league. They've got some very good players on their books. I think they're the second favourites to win that Belgian league. No disgrace to get knocked out there. I think it was 5-1 on aggregate. They never got close. And if you just look at the squad that Antwerp have, I don't think you could have expected Lillestrøm to. So nothing against them there. As for Viking, they've got it this far. Steaua Bucharest, which is definitely a match they're going to be underdogs for, but why not? They've come this far now. They actually lost against Sligo Rovers, second leg, 1-0 in Ireland, but the job was already done. This is a team that got past Sparta Prague. So if they can get past Sparta Prague, then why not Steaua Bucharest? They're going to have to dig in really deep the first leg, being away from home. I think that actually probably helps them. If they can get a draw out of that or a tight defeat, they're back in the game. So I've got a feeling about Viking actually here. I think they could actually end up getting outplayed over the 2 legs, but find a way through. And ultimately in football, it's all about the result, isn't it?
It is indeed. And of course, they've come through Sligo Rovers, haven't they? So fair play to them on that one. That was an interesting tie. Sleepless in Sligo, as we said. What's your prediction for the 2 Norwegian teams then, Steve, finally?
Let's say Molde win on aggregate 5-3. And Viking go through on penalties after a 2-2 on aggregate.
Big. There you go then. That's it. That's it for the European Part 1 preview. Coming up in Part 2, we're going to sort of briefly touch on the domestic action going on in our respective leagues and look at a couple of listener questions. So join us after this short break. Welcome to part 2 of the Nordic Football Podcast, this week's episode. And if you haven't followed us on Twitter, make sure you do it. Twitter at Nordic Footpod. You can also find us, you can find Henry at Football in DK. And don't forget YouTube. We've got all our videos go on YouTube. Henry's done a brilliant interview a couple of weeks ago with a top player out in the USA. And we've also had the assistant manager of Varnamo, amongst others. So a lot to get in there. And of course, we had one of the best young talents in world football on last week's episode, Andreas Cornelius. Henry recently back from Denmark, and that's where we're going to start. You, I very much enjoyed listening to the interview last week, and you've actually been to the teams that we're going to talk about. You've seen pretty much every single team on your trip out there. So let's start with the weekend's results that have just gone. Michelin on Friday had a bit of a, should we say, hairy result against Horsens. 3-3, and this is becoming a little bit of a trend, isn't it? You've actually seen Michelin in the flesh in the last week or so. What has been going on with Michelin? Because they are, 7th in the table at this moment in time, and you've noticed a sort of a strange goings on there.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary actually that outside of the bottom 3, nobody has won fewer games than Michelin. They've only won once this season. And yeah, when I was out in Denmark a week or so ago, there was this unbelievable game where they were 3-0 up against newly promoted Lyngby, and got pegged back to a 3-3 draw with a sort of dramatic last gasp equaliser. And so when they played Horsens this weekend just gone and went 3-0 up in the first half, I wrote a tweet and said, where have we seen this before? 3-0 up in the first half against a newly promoted team, ha ha ha, surely it's not going to happen again. Surely they've learnt their lesson. And sure enough, it went 3-1, 3-2. And at that point, it was it was almost you were watching something you knew was going to happen in real time, and sure enough, Jensen popped up with a phenomenal header to take it to 3-3, and actually, they had a chance, could have won it 4-3 even at the end with another header. But yeah, unbelievable to do that twice in a week.
How is that even possible, Henry? I mean, I can't believe that. These are meant to be a title challenger.
I know it's remarkable that they fired their manager a couple of games ago, so it's been a caretaker manager since then. But they just look a shadow of how they were last season, and that they're not the only ones to look a shadow of where they were last season. Weirdly, they've scored 13 goals this season, which is the first in the league, and they've conceded 11, which is remarkable. Only Odense have conceded more. So yeah, they look at a bit of a mess. They've got injuries and suspensions all over the place. 2 red cards in the last week, and yeah, it's not looking good. Their next managerial appointment will need to be very well thought out, because he's going to need to turn that ship around ASAP. And on top of those 2 crazy draws, they also went out of the Champions League to Benfica, which wasn't a big surprise, but at the same time, they did lose quite heavily over the 2 legs. So they are spared any more qualifications. They just go straight into the Europa League group stages now.
Let's move on to another team. Top of the table, of course, is a team that you also saw out there. And, tell us what's been going on with Nordsjælland, because they've played 5, won 4, drawn 1. They're one of only 2 unbeaten teams, actually, in the league so far this season. Randers are the other one. That obviously, we had the brilliant interview with Sheldrup, who is a world-class potential talent. But their most recent result was a 0-0 draw, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. So until this weekend, they were the only team who'd won all of their games. But they're still top of the league. Got 13 points, 4 wins and a draw. And they're certainly a team that I have a soft spot for, given their sort of approach and their focus on development and their really attractive brand of football. And so in my preseason prediction, I felt they were going to struggle just based on what I saw last season and the various outgoings. And so it's with real pleasure that I've seen them do so well this season. And one of the big questions we had was who's going to replace Simon Adingra in that sort of left wing position. He was obviously so important for them last season in terms of his performances and his goals. And sure enough, the kind of conveyor belt of talent has thrown up another player in Ernest Nuama, who looks fantastic as well. He's been a breath of fresh air for them. He looks really dynamic, very good dribbler. Very fast, and yeah, he's slotted in there nicely, and that's allowed Sheldrup to play more of the, I think, as we talked about in the interview, he's sort of playing a bit more of an attacking midfield position rather than a false 9, and or stuck out on the left wing, and that's giving him the ability to operate much more effectively. And he's got I think it's 3 goals and 2 assists this season already. So yeah, he's looking fantastic. And then I guess the other player to mention is player who was on loan last season from Brentford, and he's had his loan extended for another season, Mads Bidstrup. And he looks really, really, really class in central midfield. He seems to be all over the pitch. I'd love to see his statistics for how much ground he covers, because he's a energizer bunny in that midfield, but looks a really good addition for the season. So they've been super impressive, and long may it continue.
2 teams who we talked about in part 1 actually clashed at the weekend as well, didn't they? Viborg and Silkeborg. Now, I don't know if maybe one or other team had an eye on, of course, their big games coming up. Silkeborg, as we mentioned, playing against Finnish opposition, and Viborg playing West Ham. Viborg came out 2-0 winners in that game, Henry, on Sunday. I just got a question for you on Christian Sorensen. I mean, how good is he? He got a goal and assist in this game. He's got 2 goals now, 3 assists at the start of the season, I believe, in 5 games. I know you mentioned some talents at Viborg, didn't you? I know he's not exactly a young talent, but how good are Viborg looking? And in general, what was your thoughts on that game? Did either team have an eye on maybe European competition? Because Silkeborg were actually second at the table at the moment.
Yeah, that was actually a bit of an upset. I mean, not necessarily a massive one, because Viborg have been playing well this season, but Silkeborg have looked so assured. I certainly didn't expect them to lose without scoring. To answer your question on Sorensen, he is really the key player for Viborg, and it's quite strange to say that of a left back, but just the number of chances he creates is just really unbelievable. Last season we talked about how he created 118 chances, and that was first in the league by a mile. The next player was 73, and this season he's already the top chance producer. He's got those 2 goals and 3 assists, and so I think that he's absolutely fundamental to what they do. At Viborg, he's playing left back for the first time in his career, I believe. He's always played further forward before that, so that's where they're really getting the best out of his attacking abilities. But today there've been quite strong rumours that he might be heading to Brøndby, so that would be a huge loss for Viborg if that happened.
Yeah, and that would be quite damaging to them, wouldn't it, in terms of how they're doing at the start of the season. I'm going to ask you in a minute a little bit about a couple of final questions before we move on to other leagues. But Aarhus played this evening and won 1-0, and they're doing quite well in the table as well. They're third. But we just got a question live on air, which this seems to happen quite a lot recently.
It always happens, doesn't it? It's incredible.
I don't know what it is. It's a sixth sense with our listeners somehow. But I think it's quite a controversial one, so I'm going to ask both of you. So I'm just going to bring in Steve here quickly, and then I'm going to get your take, Henry, and then we'll continue with Denmark.
I love it. I come in for controversy, don't I?
Yes, it's Davide at Undervalue, who, by the way, has some great threads on Twitter. If you don't follow him, check him out. He talks about sporting directors and that kind of thing. He said that he's asked about Lillestrøm, which I'm going to ask later, maybe, Steve. But the question he's asked is, can Bodø Glimt challenge FC Core for Scandinavian supremacy in 3 to 5 years? My initial observation of that is that maybe you could argue they are already challenging, but I could be completely wrong. I'm going to get region perspective, and then I'm going to get a Finnish perspective.
No way. I mean, just sheer fan base. I mean, this is a great period for Glimt, and they need to make sure they cement themselves now as one of the big teams in Norway regularly, even when they're sort of on a down year. But I don't think any team will ever, unless Rosenborg go mad one day, ever challenge, FCK for Scandinavian supremacy from Norway anyway. I'm not even thinking of Sweden actually for a moment. Then Malmö obviously would have something to say about that. But I just think surely FC Copenhagen's fan base and resources are just, they're vast, aren't they? Let's be honest.
Henry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really impressed by what Glimt are doing, but Copenhagen are arguably the biggest team in the whole Nordic region. In fact, I don't even really think it's arguable at the moment. So I think it would take a much more sustained period of Glimt dominance to start sort of challenging that position. But I think that as long as they're not playing a Danish team, I love seeing Nordic teams do well in Europe. So hopefully both can coexist happily in the Champions League group stage this season.
There we go. Hopefully that answers the question and some interesting perspectives. I guess in terms of supremacy, are you looking at it from a kind of like fan base point of view? Then I'd probably say, it depends on you if you're looking at it on the pitch or you're looking at it in terms of titles.
On the pitch,
many different ways of looking at it. But yeah, that's a decent answers in general. Anyway, let's talk about, is it Aarhus in the middle of our street? I don't know how you pronounce it. I don't know who you can pronounce who they played, because I know
absolutely madness there, Jonathan.
There's a few linguistic quirks lately on this podcast, isn't it? So tell us, what was the score of this game and who played?
The game from today?
Yes.
Yeah, they were playing our favourites Lyngby and it was 1-0 victory. And yeah, I have to say, AGF have been one of the sort of positive stories of the season in terms of just the leap in performances that they've made under Uwe Rosler this season, given where they were last season under David Nielsen, is just extraordinary. They look so much more energetic, so much more determined, and the results are coming. 5 games in, they've won 3 and drawn 1. And only lost the once. And incredible goal today. Seek it out if you can find it. Jan Bisak firing it in from well outside the box, top corner. But yeah, they've made some smart signings, and I think that in combination with Rosler and his Klopp style heavy metal football, I think that it's really paying dividends. So yeah, that they look great this season, and I think will be maybe too early to say a lock, but I think that they're almost certainly going to be a top 6 team.
Yeah, it's a curious sort of note to see Uwe Rosler there, obviously former Malmo manager, with Malmo kind of struggling these days. Looking through their squad as well, they've got a couple of players who have, we've commented on this podcast in the past. I think Sigurd Haugen, formerly of Arlesund, of course. And they've also got Eric Carr, who was, I believe, at AIK. He was at AIK for a while. He's a decent talent. I remember watching him a few times. They've also got the magnificently named South African called Gift Links.
Yeah, so one of the best names in the league.
I think he sounds like it could be a rapper or something. That's a great name. Gift Links, only built for Gift Links. So before we wrap up the Danish section, Henry, we've got to talk about the 2 big sort of clubs in this division in terms of FC Core, as you just mentioned there, and Brøndby, 8th and 9th at this moment in time. What is going on? And just give us a bit of context about the derby as well, because you wrote a fantastic piece on your website about it. Talk to us a little bit more about the derby and what is going on with them both at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, going into the derby, both teams had only won once in the season, so it was really an opportunity to kickstart the season. And I think both managers were coming under a little bit of pressure, not just for the results, but for the performances, really. And so, yeah, the derby came about. Obviously, for me, it was about not just what was happening on the pitch, but all the stuff around it, the atmosphere and the occasion. But on the pitch, it was a really exciting game. Copenhagen ran out 4-1 winners in the end, Pep Biel hat-trick. And you felt that, such an emphatic win in the derby would really sort of be a shot in the arm for them in terms of kickstarting their season. But then, to follow that up with a home loss to Randers just feels like once again it's a step forward and a step or 2 steps backwards. That they very, very badly need a number 9, and I would say the same is true for Brøndby. That they've got Matthias Kvistgaarden, who looks great, but is very young, and to sort of put the goal scoring burden on the shoulders of a teenager doesn't really feel fair. So I think both of them need a goal scorer, but they also need the manager to find some way to get them playing the sort of football that the fans expect at those teams, and it's just not been happening this season. Brøndby also got knocked out of Europe last week. They lost on penalties to Basel. So yeah, both teams really struggling this season. I fully expect both to be in the top 6 come the end of the season, but yeah, not been the start to the season that they had hoped for. But I did enjoy the derby.
Amazing scenes there. I've just seen your tweet as well from earlier saying about Daniel Wass straight into action for Brøndby. I can't believe he's at Brøndby. We were just talking about off air. Me and Steve were just talking about the classic days of Evian, the French team who was so good. Daniel Wass was like a legendary player.
Oh, yes.
And he's 33 now. I've just seen, but he's played his first game for Brøndby. That is a hell of a signing.
Evian Tongaia. What a team! What a shirt!
The shirt is the best shirt in football. I was actually talking about it because I was thinking of getting the shirt. But I think Vass is a brilliant signing.
That's a heck of a signing.
Yeah. There'd been lots of talk about him returning because I believe he was there previously, and it does tend to be the case that you kind of return to where you made your name. And yeah, he came through the youth ranks at Brøndby and played for 3 or 4 years there before moving to Benfica, I think it was. So yeah, he's returned at age 33 and will probably see out his career there. And I think that he's quite a versatile player. He can obviously play right back or central midfield, and I think that that's kind of what Brøndby need at the moment. And I think that there's a lot more business to be done for both teams in Copenhagen, actually.
How time flies, I remember him as a young 23-year-old at Everton Gaillard, just making his name. Played for Celta Vigo since Valencia, Atletico Madrid, and now back home in Denmark. We're going to move on to Norway now. I do have one final question for you, actually, Henry, in a minute, but I'm going to... I'll ask you it now, actually. You mentioned both teams need a striker. Who would you suggest for each team as a striker from the Danish league? Like, who is ready to step up? You don't have to answer it now. I'm going to go to Steve, but I'm going to come back to you after Steve's answer. So tune in if you want to hear that answer. But unless you have it right now, of course. If you need some time to think about it, or if you've got the answer immediately.
What is my actual question?
The question's for me.
Yeah, we haven't started with you, Steve. Don't worry.
Oh, you. Well, okay.
Yeah, give me a couple of minutes, and I will. I'll come back with a well thought answer.
Good. No way it is then. So you've got some time to think about some replacement strikers for those two big clubs. Steve, we're going to start with a question that we've had on Lillestrøm. And it's an undervalued question, which I didn't ask you earlier. He said, what are your thoughts on Lillestrøm domestically? I noticed that they haven't had the best of times of late. They're down to third now. We did talk about it on the last episode, but 1-0 win, 1-0 defeat this weekend at Jørv. That's a big loss, isn't it?
I'm going to sound smoother now because I actually switched mics. I was using the wrong bloody microphone for the first half of this episode, so I will be sounding clearer now. But we have to start here, actually. Jørv 1, Lillestrøm 0, and this was a bonkers game. The XG for this game was ridiculous. Something like over 3 XG for Lillestrøm against 2 XG for Jørv. The only goal scored was a penalty. I can't believe some of the misses in this match. There was one, remember Bermancevic last week? This was probably worse from Tobias Svensson. It had a 0.83 XG. And I tell you now, I wasn't really that interested in the game, but when this miss happened at the time, I went absolutely carried. One of those crazy moments where you just go out and say, wow, etc. I think the wife was near me at the time, sitting on the sofa, and was like, what the effing hell are you doing? Screaming out so loudly because it was one of those like incredible moments, like how has he missed? But they won't know how they lost this game. I've just got a feeling that I thought this was going to happen at some stage where they would lose a game inexplicably. They're not used to being up there in the title race. They'd just been to Belgium in midweek and lost. And, it could be a pivotal defeat for them because they got Rosenborg sniffing down their necks. I do need to talk about them in this episode. And obviously, Bodø/Glimt have won again. And Molde weren't in action this week, but they're 5 clear of them. And I think there was another question someone put about Lillestrøm, about are they going to stay in the title race, etc., etc. I don't think they will. And now for me, it's about whether they can actually even get in a medal spot. And most likely team to finish 4th from this position is probably Lillestrøm. Really missing Akor Adams already. I think he would have buried a couple of the chances they had. Frid Johnson, I said it in last week's pod, just doesn't have that extra bit of quality and flair and X factor that Adams has. But even he should have converted a couple of his chances on Sunday. It was a bonkers game. As for Jørv, well done to them. Whenever they've won a match this season, it's always been 1-0. But you can see why they're struggling down there. They're not good enough. But it was a great day for them to get 3 points.
Yeah, and there were some Friday games, which is quite rare, isn't it, in Norway? I was quite surprised about that. Glimt obviously won 4-1 at Sarpsborg, and Rosenborg won 5-2 at Sandefjord. So it was definitely a day for goals. You mentioned a question that we had, and I'm going to ask that now. It's from @Janazai Flying Dutchman, who has been engaging quite a lot on Twitter lately. So good to see you again, Mr. Flying Dutchman. He says, or she says, will Eliteserien have a 3-way title race, or are Lillestrøm not up to that task? And I guess you're answering it by saying that they aren't up to that task.
They could still be a three-way title race, but with Rosenborg involved. So, but I don't think Lillestrøm will be involved. Thank you very much for your question, Flying Dutchman. Flying Dutchman, what was that? Was that a ghost ship back in the day? It rings a bell anyway. You might know better than me, boys. But I just think it's going to be now a case for them if they can hang on for a medal. They will rebound at some point. They're out of Europe now, which helps them. They will get Akor Adams back from injury as well. And, all isn't lost, but it's like a mid-season wobble. It's been coming. They've hung on in some games. The goalkeeper bailed them out a couple of weeks ago, getting an equaliser in the 94th minute. And you can't keep relying on that, can you? So they've only got themselves to blame this week. They should never have lost that game. They should have won it. And it's a sort of match, though, that can really deflate you, can't it?
Yeah, and funny enough, you mentioned Flying Dutchman. He definitely is a loyal listener to this podcast because he said in the past few days about Christensen, I need Christensen to lose so he can have Faduba rant like he did about AF Core last year, like laughing emoji. So he's clearly been tuned in, and Christensen did indeed lose, didn't they? So yeah, I'm not exactly ranting, but I have to say it's not looking good for Christensen. Bottom 6 points, and you have now gone up to 15. Are now 15th with 14 points. So it's really looking like curtains for Christensen. Let's be honest. We'll move on. I know you said you wanted to talk about Rosenborg, Steve. What's to talk about there? I mean, 5-2 win at Sandefjord, who are 10th now, but they're just creeping up the league, aren't they?
This was another crazy game. I don't trust the Rosenborg defense whatsoever. They the first start, it was 2-2 after 15 minutes in this game. I was like, what the hell's going on? But neither team could defend. Sandefjord, I think, should have been ahead before half-time. There was Ofkir rounded the keeper and there was an open goal, and then he slipped. So there was another huge chance in that match that was missed. But really, all the talk is about the new signing of Rosenborg, Kasper Tengstedt from Horsens. He scored on his debut the previous week against HamKam, and he scored a hat-trick in this match. Now, I like his position. He seems to be in the right place at the right time. And I think he's got a composure about his finishing, which is quite good. I mean, this guy's only coming from the second tier in Denmark. So I don't think we could expect miracles from him. But already he's obviously impressed a lot to get the starting gig. And he looks like quite a clinical finisher. And to be honest, I think a few are starting to put him in the fantasy teams. He's not very cheap at 9.5 million, I think, in the fantasy game. But if he keeps scoring these sort of chances, then fair play to him. I think the third goal, there was a big suspicion of offside. Pretty sure VAR would have called that one back if it was in the league. But, Rosenborg had too much offensive strength in the second half. They look, for the first time in quite some time, actually strong offensively. And we've not been able to say that, have we, probably since pre-Horneland days. And if you can go into a match and you're capable of outscoring anyone, then I think in Norway, that's a big strength.
He's
four wins in a row now for Rosenborg. They've beaten Tromsø, Odd, HamKam, and Sandefjord. They've got Arlesen next, and then Tromsø again. Kasper Tengstedt, we had a tweet about him as well from @Joe Gould. Joe Gould at 12th Yank. Sorry, he said Tengstedt has revolutionized this Rosenborg team. What a signing! Henry, I'm going to bring you back in now because we are talking about strikers. He's come from the second tier. Have you got any for us, or should we keep?
He's actually come from the Superliga. Horsens were promoted last season, so they've signed him from a Superliga club. And I was a bit gutted to see Tengstedt go, to be honest. He was really, I think he was the top scorer at Horsens last season, and he was looking great this season. He was in my fantasy team, and yeah, it's obviously it's a great opportunity for him. But I just wonder whether he's I just wonder really about like what's the dynamics of that move. Is he, does he see it as a stepping stone to going to I don't know, a Belgium or a France, or is he convinced that he's going to get into Europe with that move? I don't know.
And and the other goal scorer, Henry, I'm going to put you on the spot on your strikers in a minute, or if not, we'll hang you on a little bit longer. But another interesting goal scorer in that game, Steve, Brian Fiabima. He's on loan from Chelsea. I didn't actually realize he's not really pulled up trees, has he, on loan? I know he's a Norwegian, I believe, who's got a bright future. I think I know he's come from their under 23s. I think he's ex-Tromso, am I right in saying? Well, but yeah, interesting to see him on the score sheet. How's he getting on?
Not very well, to be honest. He hasn't really impressed me this season much. He's made a few fleeting substitute appearances. He's had chances to start and he hasn't really taken it. He was delighted to get on the score sheet late on here. He was loving life. And why not? Because it's probably one of his better games he's had. But he hasn't really caught the world on fire to Rosenborg yet this season. And I think now, certainly when Vecchia gets back, I think he's going to be just used as a bench option all season, really.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a strange one, that, actually, because I thought he was quite highly rated. But of course, when you're that young, you probably still need time to adjust to the league and all that kind of thing. We're going to move on to a couple of more teams in Norway, and then we'll switch over to Sweden. Steve, was there anything else that majorly caught your eye? I know Tromsø beating Kristiansand 2-1, HamKam 1, Vålerenga 1, Arlesund 1, Haugesund 2. And then obviously you got our Sarpsborg game that we just talked about, and also the Rosenborg game. Is there any other teams that you would sort of want to briefly discuss before we move on to Sweden?
Yeah, Tromsø. I think Charlotte Patterson had a question about Tromsø. Said, what do you think about their survival chances now? Looking at the table, they're in 9th, but pretty much any team from 7th down could fall down there. And who do I think will be struggling at the wrong end of the table? I think one thing we've got to say about Tromsø is that they have been massively helped by facing Kristiansand twice in the last 3 matches. And they've only got 4 points out of it. But it was important they beat them. They're up to 21 points on the board now, unbeaten in 4 matches. I think what we're seeing is that the promoted teams are really struggling performance-wise. Like Jerv, HamKam have had a bad run, or they got a late draw. And Arlesund are starting to slide down as well. It's a time of year where you lose that promotion bubble, isn't it? The momentum that you can have. So I think we're probably going to see Kristiansand go down, Jerv go down, automatic. And I think the third spot will be, well, it could be anyone. I mean, Sarpsborg are down there right now. I mean, I had a couple of interesting Twitter interactions, I think, with a Sarpsborg fan at the weekend. I wasn't slagging off Stefan Bilbon, but I was saying, that under his, management, that they just can't defend. So, I think that pretty much covers the Charlotte's question. Now, I would say at the minute, if I had to pick a team for third bottom, I would say Arlesund, because they need to really reinforce in the market. Sigurd Horgan, losing him was a massive blow. But it could be any one of about 5 or 6 teams getting in that playoff spot, John.
Yeah, we have to give a massive shout out to Charlotte Patterson, loyal supporter of the podcast at Kirby Hasland. Really appreciate everything you're doing, and I hope you're well. And it's a great question as well. So, didn't know you were a Tromsø fan. I don't know if you are a Tromsø fan, or if it's just curiosity. But if you're listening,
she is, yeah.
Tweet us and let us know. Henry, strikers. One from Copenhagen.
Yeah, and you specify they have to come from the league, so this was interesting. So for Brøndby, this is maybe a bit of a cop out because he's been linked with them already. So this is one that might happen. But Nicholas Hellenius from Silkeborg, obviously last season's Golden Boot winner. As much as I believe that his success is very, very strongly linked to Kent Nielsen and the system that's in place at Silkeborg, so I'm not convinced that it would be a slam dunk move. I would still be fascinated to see him at Brøndby and see how he does there, and whether he can sort of transplant his golden touch to them, or whether it was just a product of the system. So that would be my pick for Brøndby. For FC Co, there's this is an interesting one. I would say that probably the player who would be most interesting for them would be Stephen Odie from Randers. I think that when he's been fit, he's looked dangerous. He's a very good goal scorer. Still got a lot of upside to him. So yeah, I would say him. Or as a complete wildcard option, there is a player who's just coming through this season at Aalborg, Anock Ementa, and he's 6'7", and just so an absolute colossus up front. And I don't think he scored yet, but I remember in the game against FC Copenhagen that they lost, he looked very interesting, just in terms of what he can offer. You know, the classic good feet for a big man. But I'd just be fascinated to see him surrounded by a bit more of a functional team.
I love it. Over to you, Steve.
Yes, we're leaving Sweden till last year, and we might have to rush through a couple of things. But the key results from the weekend round, I think it's fair to say, Malmo 3, Sundsvall 1, Djurgården 3, Kalmar 2. AIK dropped points against Värnamo at home, and then 2 really big fixtures on Monday evening. Häcken 1, Mjällby 0. They managed to keep their lead at the top of the table, and AFK Gothenburg is 0. Hammarby 1. There was a missed penalty in that match. I think it was crucial as well. Now, where should we start then? Häcken on Monday evening against Mjällby. Really important for them. They've come through Mjällby twice thanks to a couple of late goals this season, and I think those 6 points could be really crucial come the end of the campaign, Jonathan.
Häcken?
Yeah.
Yeah, they the reason I'm just thinking about Häcken, to be honest, because I think this is a big day in the course of the title race potentially. We've had this evening EFK against Hammarby, and obviously BK Häcken, as you just mentioned there, against Mjällby. 1-0 win for Häcken. The top of the table. Anyone who knows about Mjällby, you only have to listen to our episode with Anders Torstensson, and the culture there, very sort of regimented, very stern and tough to beat. Deep block, they'll defend things. Maybe the Burnley of Allsvenskan, potentially, you could say. And it was always going to be a question mark of, like, I would say that Häcken are kind of not quite I wouldn't say quite. They're not as good as Glimt, but they try and play that style of football. Technical players. They've actually just signed Tobias Sana from EFK Göteborg, who obviously fell out with Mika Stara. He's moved across town. Players like Blair Turgut, they've got a lot of technical players, athletic players, like to get forward quickly. So this was a real clash of styles, and the question really was, could Häcken dominate that deep block of Mjällby? It took them 79 minutes, and there was no Jeremejeff. I saw he was your fantasy captain, Steve. So he wasn't well. He was ill.
He missed so many chances when he came on. He should have had a hat-trick.
Yeah, he was ill. But to be fair, when he came on, they scored almost immediately afterwards. Mikael Rygaard was the hero. Lovely taking goal, to be fair to him, on his left foot, really calm. He's added a big presence to the midfield of Häcken. I think he's been a key man, actually, in them getting to the top of the table this season. I think he's been fantastic. But yeah, that was all they needed. Once you score against Mjällby, it's, sometimes with the system they play, it's hard for them to switch styles and sort of go on the offensive. And one thing about Mjällby, to be fair, though, they do tend to create a lot of late chances. They've scored a lot of late goals this season. And they missed a massive chance at the end, 90th minute. Lofqvist, who's back. Remember, we spoke about him a lot last season. The man who I will never forget, who is so powerful and strong. He ran into a crossbar, and the crossbar came off worse. He had a brilliant chance, and he put it wide header. Should have scored, and that could have changed the whole title race. But Häcken have got away with it in that sense. I don't think they were great. Don't think they were really that good on it today, really. A lot of their forward players, Turgut went off, for example. They didn't really click, but they've got that win. And what do we say about title winners on this podcast, Steve? You need to be able to get the job done in those games where maybe you're not at your best, and that is what BK Häcken have done. And to be fair, that was a question mark I've had about them all season long. I think they will have bigger tests to come. Mjällby are a good side, but if you can't beat Mjällby at home, there's bigger tests to come, let's say. But I think just psychologically, in terms of being able to get it done in a tight game against a tough opposition, 12 games to go, I think that was psychologically could be a real huge result for them, actually, as in this title race.
Malmo 3, GIF Sundsvall 1. Now, I looked at the XG for this game. Sundsvall had an XG of 0.11. So I feel sorry for anyone who backed Malmo to win to 0. But were you convinced by Malmo in this fixture? And I mean, they've certainly put the pressure on their rivals again. I think just if they're even just up there lurking, then they're always going to be a danger, aren't they? But I mean, beating GIF isn't particularly eye-catching these days, is it?
Yeah, I feel like kind of maybe I did cover this a lot in part one, so I'll keep it fairly brief in terms of on Malmo. But once again, I wasn't impressed, to be honest. 3-1 win, goals from Berman Savic and Isaac Kiese-Tellen got 2. about half an hour into this game, I started to think to myself, you know what, Keith, maybe he was listening to my brain or something, but I was thinking to myself, Keith Tellin's not really had a great impact since his return to Malmo. That team with Jon Dahl Tomasson in charge, you know, he was like the main focal point. He was such a brilliant striker that year and almost helped fire them to the title. And as this game sort of plodded along, I was thinking to myself, he's not really, he obviously went away. I think he had a spell in Saudi Arabia or something like that. He came back and it's not really worked out for him. He did then go on to get 2 goals, so show how much I know, judging him too quickly. But I still get a sense that he's not entirely clicked in this team. They've obviously brought players now like Buya Toure up front as well to play around him. So I felt that maybe they feel like they need to give him more support. But I think this was an important game for Keith Tellin just to get back in the rhythm. He's had a few injuries as well, so it's not entirely his fault. I'm not saying he's dipped or anything, but just hasn't quite had the same impact. But I think it was important for him to get some goals. Berman Savic scored as well. I think the jury's out in Malmo just in terms. There's a lot of players that are kind of coasting a little bit, in my opinion. I think Berman Savic kind of embodies it. He had some really good chances to score more goals, and just I feel like he's just been a bit lackluster. I just feel. I don't know if it's Jon Dahl Tomasson, who, by the way, is top of the league at Blackburn at the moment in the Championship.
Oh, I'm going to get reminded of that every week.
I don't know if it's like a slight drop in standards, but I just feel like that a lot of the players are not on it at the moment. There was a moment in this game where I think it was Nielsen or Bejimo, I can't remember exactly who, but he had to go to Berman Savic and sort of say to him, listen, like, you know, he went to him and pointed at him and was sort of saying to him, like, you know, sort yourself out kind of thing early in the first half. You know, don't get your head down kind of thing, because he was kind of dropping his head and getting frustrated even in the early part of the match. And I just wonder if there's a little bit of a dip in standard. There was a chance at 3-0 where Berman Savic, he was put through and it was like, just take a touch. Last season, Berman Savic would have taken a touch, steadied himself and made it 4-0. And he just took it first time and just rolled it, sort of P-rolled it wide. And I know it's little things I'm just talking about in the game here, but there's just these little moments that I'm seeing that kind of don't bode well for me in terms of Malmo this season. And they took their eye off the ball in the second half again. GIF got goal back, but obviously GIF Sundsvall at the bottom of the table. They weren't really going to do much in this match. But in terms of the title race, if you look at it, you know, Malmo, they still don't have a manager unless the interim manager stays till the end of the season. The former Arsenal man, Georgsen, they're 5 points off it. It's doable in terms of winning the league, but I still remain a little bit unconvinced by them. I think my one conclusion this weekend, Steve, is I think Djurgården and Hammarby are looking strongest at this moment in time. AIK dropped points again. They're now 6 points off it. It's a big loss for Göteborg in terms of EFK, in terms of trying to win the title. I know that they weren't really ever in it, but I think that's probably them officially out of it now, 8 points behind. But I think Djurgården and Hammarby, I think I'd put them my favourites at this moment in time above Häcken and Malmö.
All right, one final thing before we finish then. And I mean, Malmö are obviously the power horse of Swedish football right now. But I do know you wanted to talk about this, the former Southampton man, Anders Svensson, has said something in the media, I think either tonight or yesterday, but he's a bit concerned about Swedish football. And I know you wanted to just elaborate on this a little bit.
Yeah, I thought since Sweden is last on this show, you know, what's happening? You know, I think it would be interesting to talk about it. And also, there's no Swedish team in the Champions League group stage chat that we just had earlier in the show as well. You know, we talked about Glimt, we talked about FC Copenhagen, but glaringly, there's no Swedish team in the last round of it. And I thought this was an interesting comment from Anders Svensson that I'm just going to end it on, and maybe anyone who listens to this, or we could talk about it next week, maybe. But he obviously is a famous player, as you just mentioned there. He's had a storied career, and he came out this week and said that he thinks that Swedish football is slipping further and further behind on every level. I think he's talking about maybe wanting to change. I don't know if he's campaigning for something. I don't know. I don't quite exactly know his agenda, but it has been a bit of a talking point in Sweden. He said, if you look at the game, for example, he said he pointed at Malmo and he said that the Zalgiris game, he said it doesn't send good signals to our talented younger people when a team like Malmo plays in the qualifiers and most of their players are around 30 years of age. He said there are some fingers that I need to point and problems that I see in Swedish football at this moment in time. He talks about the financial situation in Sweden, maybe not being able to attract players, but he also said that, you know, he also had a bit of a dig at Malmo, and just in terms of them not relying on their academy, he said Malmo produced some young players, but it's incredible. They're incredible at producing talent at the youth teams. I think they should have produced even more young players. In the qualifiers against Zalgiris, half the team was over 30 years old. And this doesn't just apply to Malmo. You really want the players to be in the team and given chances. So basically, he's come out with these sweeping statements about how he would change Swedish football. I don't know if he's campaigning for something like I say, but he basically said we lag behind individually and in individual training. We lag behind the rest of Europe. There's an incredible number of talented coaches and collective training is fantastic, but I think we need to get better at looking after the needs of individuals. Young players in Sweden leave before they have even made their debut at the highest level. It's not good enough. They probably feel that they will get better training and development abroad. A lot of it is about resources, and it's difficult to take care of individual needs when you have 25 individuals and at best you have 2 or 3 coaches. Now, of course, we talked to David Salini a couple of weeks ago about at Värnamo, and he mentioned they have 3 full-time staff, I think, and they're in Allsvenskan. They're a high-performing team. So he does maybe have a little bit of a point here in terms of the development of players. And, it's my bugbear, and I'm sure Henry, of course, I always ask Henry about Benjamin Nygren. I always use him as an example. He left EFK so quickly, and he's now sort of on the bench at Nordsjælland, hardly getting games. He could have played sort of 50 games for EFK by now if he'd stuck around easily and been a top-class player. We saw this week Pontus Dahlberg just come back to EFK Göteborg. Watford basically rescinded his contract. They paid millions of pounds for him. He went on loan to Doncaster. He went on loan here and there in England, and he's back now. And he's going to be number 2 goalkeeper at EFK.
It's madness, isn't it? Look at the guy at Toulouse as well.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting thing to end the show on, because I know we don't have a huge amount of time to talk about Sweden, but maybe we can pick up on this in a future episode, because Spencer went on to talk about a lot of things. He talked about nutrition in Swedish football. He talked about fitness, physical technique. And I just thought it was an interesting talking point, especially with Dahlberg coming back to the EFK and other players like that, like Henry. I talked to you often about Nygren and how he's getting on. Just seems like maybe with Malmo not doing so well in this year's Champions League, is it maybe time to think about where Swedish football's going? Because it's a fantastic league, but I do kind of empathise with him in the sense of, like, sometimes the development of players is a little bit off in terms of how quickly they leave and then how quickly they come back.
Yeah, I don't know if you got any thoughts on that, Henry, at all. I mean,
but one of the names that instantly pops out to me when you were talking about Malmo was Rooney Badagi, who's obviously considered to be one of the top, if not the top, talents in all of Scandinavia. And he obviously came through at Malmo before being snapped up by FC Copenhagen. And we've talked about him before, how the fact that he is the youngest ever scorer in the Superliga, made his debut 4 days after his, I think it was 4 days after his 16th birthday. And that there's talk now even that he might be sold this summer because he's not yet signed a long-term contract. So his star is growing, and that's a perfect example really of a player who came through at Malmo and that they couldn't necessarily hold on to.
Yeah, it's another fantastic example, to be fair. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting debate. If you're listening to the show, tweet us your opinion on that and what you think, because we may develop that in future episodes. But it's just, it's a really good talking point.
I think that's all we've got time for this episode, boys. So, it's been an absolute pleasure. Let's go through where can we find you, Henry, again?
At FootballInDK on Twitter and footballindenmark.com.
And
Jonathan?
You can find me out there, out and about.
Ground up.
At JO Football, FUTBOL. I actually made my debut on CNN last week. So if you watch what CNN was, you'll see me. I don't know how, but yeah, that was interesting. So, obviously you can find me on Twitter and just tweet at Nordic Footpod as well. Often I'm looking at the account and happy to reply. But yeah, great to have you on the show, Henry, as well. Really enjoyed your time.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to do it, the three of us. And, this time in a few years' time, maybe I'll be doing a CNN too.
A few years' time? I think a few weeks' time. The radio.
You can follow the podcast at Nordic Footpod. Thanks to all our patrons again, as always. And you can follow myself at Meatman Soccer. So it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. We shall see you around. I'm sure I'll see you around, at some point again soon. But thanks for listening all. Take care and goodbye.